Just a quick introduction. So my name is Joe Sphere. I will be presenting the first part of the trilogy of the Standards, Collaboration, and API trilogy. Today we're going to talk about standards in Automation Studio. I'm also here with my colleague David Piperny, who will be ready to answer any of your questions during the presentation. So while I'm presenting, if you have anything that's not clear, feel free to raise your hand and we will answer your questions. So I'm going to show you a little bit how to operate the interface that you have in front of you right now. I will show my screen. There you go. David, can you see my screen?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So what you see here is the control panel for the GoTo Webinar. If you need to ask a question, simply raise your hand by clicking on that hand button on the taskbar right here, and we'll be able to either listen to your question or you can type it in the question area right here. Just for your information, your mics are now muted. This is done just to avoid any audio problems and feedback issues. But in case you raise your hand, if you need to ask a question to everybody, we will put the sound back on your microphone. So today we're going to start with the standards presentation. I will give you first of all a quick summary of what we're going to talk about. First of all, the presentation will last about 1 hour. Okay, I will take 1 hour to present to you the topics that of interest today, and after that will follow a half-hour period for any of your questions or remarks, or if you have any specific applications you have question on. Simply we can discuss that during that half hour. So let us begin with a brief summary of the presentation. First of all, I'm going to introduce the new Automation Studio architecture for projects. So as some of you may have already seen with the previous version of Automation Studio, we had a specific project architecture. With version 6 right now, we have a novel project architecture that will allow you to create, modify, and maintain your own standards, your own company standards. Okay. So next point we're going to talk about is what are standards in Automation Studio? What does it mean? What are the options that are carried in a standard, etc. After that, we will talk a little bit about how to manipulate the standards. So first of all, how to apply given standards to specific documents. Then how to customize, how to modify a given standard, add different values to it, modify the options, etc. And then how to create your own standards. The standards we'll be talking about mostly will affect editing of your documents, so representation of the symbols and the page. They will also affect naming rules of the components. How are your components named? Because there are now automatic ways of naming your components, and they will also affect some simulation parameters, like, for example, the colors of the wires or of the hydraulic lines during simulation, etc. After that, we will talk a little bit about enterprise standards, which means once you create your standards in a specific project, there is a way for you to copy those standards between projects and to maintain them in your own database. So in case you need to deploy specific rules and regulations in your company, you can deploy this database and have it used in different projects. And then we will talk about certain standards. We will go into a little bit of detail about some page setup standards, for example, some map locator standards, and some technology-specific standards. And in the end, we will talk a little bit about templates, which some of you may be familiar with. We will see a little bit how these standards will behave with the new behavior, with the new standard approach. First of all, I'm going to introduce to you the new project architecture. I have here a very simple diagram, and basically it shows you an Automation Studio project, which you see here, contains a set of documents. So your drawings, you have different pages with different drawings on them. And you have a set of project standards, which is the novelty with version 6. Before that, all you had was a list of documents. And for each document, you had a set of document-specific options. So you can change the page layout, the page setup, the component colors, things like that, individually in each document. And there was no real centralized control for that or centralized management for that. With the new version, we added this project standards, and the project standards can be applied to any of the documents that you have in a project. They can be applied to each document individually, or the same standard can be applied to all documents, so each change will affect all the documents at the same time. Excuse me. Another novel function is the enterprise standards. And this is really one of the more important aspects, because once you create a standard or a set of standards in a project, you need to be able to carry these standards and use them in different projects instead of having to recreate them every time in a different project. So we'll talk a little bit about how to use and how to transfer standards from a project to the enterprise standards and back. So from enterprise standards to a given project. So let us begin with a small example. I will show you this using an electrical diagram. This is not really central to our explanation right now. It can be either an electrical document, a pneumatics document, a hydraulic document. Doesn't really matter. So we're going to use this here for illustration. So I have a somewhat empty page with a small electrical diagram right here, and I have access to the properties of that document. So if I go back just to illustrate to my schematic here that shows several documents, and for each document you have some properties and standards. So to access these, all I need to do is right-click and open up the document properties. And I will see here a set of standards. So under document properties, I have the first category, which is standards, which is really what we're going to talk about today. And I have some default values, some other parameters, appearance, some other information. What you see here is actually the set of document-specific properties. And the first category, the standards, is the set of standards that are applied on this document. So let's look at this list here. We have page setup standard, map locator standard, electrotechnical standard, reference and drawing tool standard. This means that for this specific document I'm viewing right here, the page setup meaning the page size, the document color, background color, the format, landscape, margins, all that is centralized in this page setup standard, and I can select from a list of predetermined standards, which are the regular or most used page setup standards. These are pre-packaged with the version, and I can create my own or modify a specific standard. So let us look a little bit inside that ANSI page setup standard. So I'm going to select it and click on Open and Modify. When I do this, I will get this area here with the first zone showing you all the standards that are used in my project as a whole, not specifically on that document. The one that is selected is the one that I just opened. And on the bottom side here, in the bottom area, I have all the data that are carried by the standard. First of all, I have a preview that will show me how the page will look like according to the options I choose here. And then I have some specific information, like, for example, the document size. Is it a standard document size? Is it a custom document size? I might want something different. I want a 15 by 9-inch paper. Maybe this is some new page format that I want to use. I can change the document orientation, portrait or landscape. Add some margins if I want. I'll add, for example, 1 inch everywhere. And I can add some other information, like, for example, some additional margins. I can add also, I can change my document color. So I want to change the background from white to gray, for example. I want to change the number of layers on my document. Okay, we might see that in a few moments. And when I apply that, notice how the document has changed format. I have now a portrait page. The dimensions changed according to what I entered. The background changed, etc. Okay, so this is just a quick introduction to the general page setup standard. So now every time I create a document in my project, I create a new empty document. It doesn't matter what type of technology it is for. If I create a new document, I can simply use the same standard on this document. So if I change the standard in one document, this can affect, so if I change my document color, for example, back to white, or I change it to yellow, yes. Now this empty document is yellow, and the one that I had before is yellow. So I just created a centralized a place or area where I can modify all my documents at the same time. So this is a quick introduction about what a standard is. It's simply a set of options that are applied to the theme that it represents. So for the page setup, these are a set of properties applied to the page setup. For the map locator standards, I will have a set of properties that will only apply to the map locator, so the grid with the columns and the lines to segment my my document, etc. We'll go into the details of each standard in a few moments. Now, if I need to apply or to modify a document independently of other documents, meaning I have two documents here that are using the same, that are following the same page setup standard, I don't want them to be identical. I want each one to follow a different page setup. So what I can do is, instead of changing the standard itself, which will be applied to all the documents that use it, I can import a copy of a standard into my document using this import a copy and modify button. If I click on that, yes, then if I change my document color or any other information here to some other color, I change that to blue and I apply. My document color is changed to blue, but if I go back to my other page, this one did not change because I did not change the main standard. I merely imported a copy of that standard into this document and I modified it. If I want, I can revert back to the the regular standards, or the standard standards, if you wish. So I click here and I revert back to my ANSI. And when I do this, I am using my generic standard. Now, let's look a little bit about in more detail at that page setup standard. So we saw some of the information, the document size, portrait or landscape, some miscellaneous information, document color. I'll go back to white. Okay. And I would like to show you one of the more important information that you might need in your page setup. In the title block area, you now have the possibility to create your own personal title block and have it applied to all the documents following this given standard. I'm just going to go back to my document orientation. I'll go back to portrait just to have something that looks standard. And I will customize, I will personalize or customize my title block. So I will create a title block here. And some of you may already be familiar with title blocks in versions 5 or 5.7 or earlier. The way to do this was to draw the title block on the document directly. And when I do that, I'll create this very quickly. Again, I'll add maybe some text and a small picture. There we go. Looks good. And I will save my title block. Notice that the title block has been created in a dedicated document. And then this will be carried by the ANSI standard, page setup standard. Yes, so I just applied my change. Notice now that I have a new title block on my document. And every time I create a new document, whether it be electrical, standard, fluid, one line, SFC, whatever, if I apply the ANSI standard to this document, which is the one that I'm using by default, it will have the title block. If I apply a different standard, it will not have the title block because I embedded my title block in the ANSI standard. Okay? So I just wanted to introduce the new way of creating title blocks in Automation Studio. This way is much more, I should say, efficient because you create your own document standard and then you apply it to any document that you want in your project, and then you'll see later you can transport this standard or this document setup and use it in different projects. Whereas with the older versions, all you could do was simply copy the title block from page to page or copy the page itself. So we introduced quickly the page setup standards. We're going to talk also briefly about the map locator standards. So notice that this page is totally blank apart from the components. So if I look at my map locator standard, I have a list of predefined map locators. In this case, for example, I might want to apply a NEMA type of map locator, and if I apply that, notice how the page changes, and now we have our map locator. Now, how did we set up this map locator? All I need to do is go back to my standard, map locator standard, and open it to look inside to see what are the options. So in this case, my NEMA standard, first of all, I have the preview, which will show me how the page will look like when I apply. And then I have my appearance, which will activate or deactivate my horizontal or vertical grid. In this case, I had only one vertical like set of lines, so a grid that is only for vertical numbering. I will add, for example, horizontal. I might want to see the page number appear in my grid properties. Maybe start with a letter. Change the width, 40, for example, etc. I'm sure that most of you are already familiar with how to set up the page setup, the map locator. So notice how I added my horizontal. I have the page number, and then I have a letter. You have also some other information in the map locator standard, like, for example, do you want to display the grid? Yes or no? Do you want to change, for example, the color of that map locator? So I will go for red, for example. If I apply, notice how the grid disappeared and my map locator is now displayed in red. So I'm sure you get the idea by now. All you need to do is open a standard, and you can modify it by simply selecting the options you want. And these will be applied to any document in the project that is following that standard. Now, we talked a little bit about how to modify an existing standard. Pretty much the same way we can create our own standard of any type. So, for example, a page setup standard or a map locator standard. I will go for a different map locator standard. So I will create a new one. Notice here that I want to add to my list. So I click on Add, and I call it, for example, Electro Map Locator. I can give it any name I want. I can even enter some comments. Webinar demo. And let's look at the preview at the same time. I will add, for example, only a horizontal numbering. I want to start with the letter A, and I want to start at the right. This is it's our new funky display. We're just going to invent this for our demo. I might want to add, I want to change the grid color from gray to black, and I apply that. Now, yes? Okay, I'm hearing that there are some graphic problems here. I'm going to reset the view. Is it better now? JC and Ziad, do you have any problems seeing my screen?
Yes.
Can you see it, or is there a problem? Is there something blocking?
Yes, yes, we see.
Okay, okay. It's good. Okay. So sorry about that. Again with the network. So okay, perfect. Thank you, JC. Okay, so I was talking a little bit about the map locator. So we created our own map locator standard. Now notice how the page did not change aspect. This is simply because I did not apply the new standard to my page. So all I need to do is go to my document properties, and under map locator standard, you'll see that I have a new entry in my list, which is Electro Map Locator, which is the one I just created. And by the way, this is a point I failed to mention. If you hover the mouse on top of the standard, you will see a preview of that standard. So this is a convenient way of knowing what to expect when you apply a standard. So I will select my Electro Map Locator and I will apply. You see that my document has now been updated. So we talked a little bit about the page setup. We talked a little bit about the map locator. We talked about how to apply and customize and create your own standard. Obviously, by the way, if I go back to my list and if I go to my map locator standard, for example, you can delete a standard. So if I go to my Electro map locator and I delete it, in this case, you see there's a message that says this standard is being used, so you shouldn't delete it. So what I will do is I will apply a different map locator standard. I'll go back, I will revert to the NEMA, and then I will delete my other standard. This is done as a security, so you don't delete any of the standards you are using by mistake. So this is it's a security measure, if you wish. So now I am back to my other map locator standard. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about some technology-specific standards. We talked about the map locator, and we talked about the electrotechnical standards. I'm sorry, the page setup standards. These are general standards. These can be applied to any type of document. It could be, sorry, fluid document, electrotechnical document, SFC document, report, anything. Now you have some technology-specific standards, like, for example, the electrotechnical standard. What this does is it doesn't affect the page layout per se. What it does is it will affect the management of your schematic. So how are your components displayed? What are their colors, the line thickness? How are your electric wires displayed? How is the simulation displayed? What are the colors in simulation, etc. So I will go to my electrotechnical standard and open it up and see what's inside. Now, you know what to expect. It's the same idea. You have the list of standards, and then you have the properties for each standard. You have a preview that will show you, this is a generic electrical drawing that will be updated according to the options you choose underneath. And you have some specific information here. First of all, the components section. This section will allow you to customize the display and the naming of all the components in Automation Studio, or in the standards that is being used, actually. So first of all, you have, I'm not going to go into all the details of all the options. This would take several days, actually. It's a specific full-fledged training on its own, but you can select the component standard. What type of symbology do you want to use? Do you want to use IEC, do you want to use NEMA, or do you want to allow for both? So in this case, you can select what you want. For example, I'll go for only NEMA. You can also change, I'll go a little bit further in the list, the component color. So by default, the components I'd like to see in red, for example. You also can change the component thickness, the power and command component thickness. If I go to 10 and 20, the satellite typography, which means I'll go for a different color here. It's going to be very, very weird, but it's just to make it more obvious, to see the change more obviously. So I changed the display properties of my components. Okay, notice how my power components have a thickness, a different thickness. My control components have a different thickness, different color, etc. So this is what is affected by the electrotechnical standard. Also notice, I'll go back to some more easy to relate to information. So I'll put it back to 5. Another set of properties is the naming rules. So component item identifier naming rule, terminal strip, pin and socket, splice, ground, frame, etc. These different component types and the generic components, which is what we see here, can be named according to a specific rule. And I can select a rule here. I can switch from IEC standard, for example, to NEMA standard long format. I'm selecting any type in my list, and I applied that. Okay. Notice what happened here. I didn't show that in the beginning, but the structure of the identifier for each component has changed. And this is done because I applied a different rule to name my component. Now let us go into more detail about these naming rules. This is a little bit, it's not too far from the standard way that you were probably familiar with version 5.7 or 5.6. You have access. First of all, you can select from a list of predetermined naming rules, or you can modify or create your own. So if you look at on the left side, just on top, above the electrotechnical standard, I have the naming rules. And similar interface, I have the list of naming rules, and for each naming rule, I go for components, IEC standard short format, for example. And in this bottom area right here, you can rename or add some comments, and you can build the individual, or you can use individual elements which will be combined to create the identifier. In this case, the rule says that for each component, I want to identify it by its component code, so that each component has a specific code, MCR for the contactor poles, CB for circuit breakers, GEN for generators, etc. This information is in the component, and a displayable number. The displayable number is simply a sequential number that is automatically calculated by Automation Studio to ensure the uniqueness of identifiers. I might want to add, for example, a dash. So I type it in my literal field and I add it to my string. I might want to add a page number, for example, which is a field specific to my component, and I add it. Maybe I want a carriage return with a displayable, or maybe location, or whatever. I'll go for X location, and I add it. Okay, so I just modified my IEC standard short format naming rule. So let me go back to my standard and use this naming rule. So I go back here and I say I want my components IEC standard short format. I hit apply, yes. I just need to refresh. There you go. And notice how all the components changed identifiers. So now I have, if you remember the rule that I was showing, it's the component code and then the number, and then there was a dash and the page number, and then carriage return, and then there was the Y location, or the Y location. Okay, which is what is managed by the map locator. Okay, notice if I move a component, this one from here to here, for example, if I refresh, the information is automatically updated. So for the technology-specific standards, there are two different types of options. You have the options that apply to the display of a symbol of a component, and the options that are related to the naming of the component. So how to construct the component's identifier. Now, you have the same type of management with wires. So you can customize wire numbering just like you can customize component numbering. You can customize wire display, just like you can customize component display. So I'm just going to show you something on the diagram, and this will illustrate a little bit better the use of standards. If I go to my document properties and under Electrotechnical Standard, I apply a new standard that is called training. This is a standard I just prepared before we began now, and I apply. Notice how my three-phase wires are displayed in 3 different colors. This was done for purposes of training, for example, so it will show you very easily, very quickly in a document which components are connected to phase 1, which ones are connected to phase 2, etc. So it's just a specific application. How did I do that? Simply by editing my electrotechnical standard. Now that you understand the concept, if I go to wires, I have access to my L1 wire color, so phase 1 wire color, I selected red. Phase 2 power wire color, selected blue. Phase 3, I selected green. So this is pretty much the idea. Just another note is you can also change the appearance of your components, not only in edition mode, meaning when you're building or editing your schematic, but in simulation mode, meaning when you are seeing the circuit in action. So in this case, we'll not go into all the details. These are options you might have seen already. You can change, for example, the wire colors according to their activation state or their energized state. If you have AC voltage, you will see green. If you have DC voltage, you'll see blue, etc. So if I change the AC voltage from green to yellow, for example, yes, I go back to my diagram. If I run the simulation, notice that now my energized wires are yellow, and the ones that are not energized are in gray. So these are all different display options of your schematic, of your components. So these are the technology-specific options or standards. Now let's talk a little bit about transferring standards. For example, I just created my diagram here, and I'm following my training standard. I'd like to create a new project and have it follow the same standard. If I create a new blank project, I call it, I don't need to call it, I don't need to save it right now. So I'm creating a new project right there. Okay. I will create in that project a small electrical diagram, just a source and a motor. I will connect them. There you go. Notice that if I go to my standards and I select for my electrotechnical standard, I look for my training standard, it's not in the list. Why is that? This is simply because I created my standard in my Electro 1 project. I want to use it in project 2. What I need to do is transfer it from Electro 1 to my enterprise database and then have it applied to project 2. And this is how we do this. So let's go back to Electro 1. If I go to Tools, you'll see that there is a standard transfer function. If I click on it, I'll have access to my standard transfer page. I can select any standard that I want on my left pane. So I'll go for my electrotechnical standard. I'll select the project from which I want to take my standard. So Electro 1, you'll see I have training right here. and I want to transfer this to my enterprise option. So the source is Electro 1, the destination is enterprise option. All I need to do is select it, one or many, doesn't matter, and I copy the selection. Once I do that, these are just messages signaling that some of the transfers are being created in the enterprise database. Now I see my training standard in the enterprise option. So I can go back. Once I do that, I don't have to transfer it every time from project to project. Every time I create a new project, I will be able to see this new standard in my, I think I just need to refresh. I will create a new standard, a new project. And new diagram, and I will apply my training standard. You see, it's here in the list. It doesn't matter how many projects I create, I will always see it in my list because it's now in my enterprise database. It's a simple file that you can carry and copy on your computers. Yes. And now, just to illustrate that, I will go back to my drawing. I'll create a quick drawing, and you'll see that automatically when I create my connections, my lines are colored. Now, this is just an example to illustrate, but I can carry or I can transfer page setup standards. I can transfer map locator standards. I can even transfer the naming rules individually. It doesn't have to be a complete standard. So any option or set of options can now be transferred between projects or from project to the enterprise standard database. A quick note before we end this presentation. I just want to give you a quick note about the document and project templates. So if I create a new template, for example, or I will apply some standards to this document. Let's apply the ANSI-B portrait, and I will apply NEMA and training as standards here, just to make the page stand out. Okay. And now I want, every time I create an electrical diagram, I want it to look like this. Obviously, without the components, because the components are added on the diagram. To do that, all I need to do is save my document as an electrotechnical diagram template. I'll give it a name here. I'll call it Webinar Electro. I save. And now every time I want to create a new document, whether it be in this project or in a new project, it doesn't matter, I'll create a new project, I will be able to create it and apply all the standards in one shot on this document. So I will create a new electrical document. Notice how in my electrotechnical diagram templates, I can select my Webinar Electro. I click OK. All the standards that I had selected when I created my template are now applied to my document. Now keep in mind that I can save the whole project also as a template. So I can create a template that will allow me to create a project that has two documents. One of them is diagram 1 following these standards. The other one is Electro 1 following those standards. So all I need to do is save the project as a template. I'll call it Electro Project. And now if I create a new project, a whole project, I'll be able to select my Electro Project template. If I click OK, I have one already open, actually. Not very smart of me. So I create a new project. And my new project has two diagrams, one fluid diagram, one electro diagram, and they are following the standards that I put in them while I was saving the project template. So to recap, let's go back here. So we talked a little bit about using the standards, applying them, modifying them, and creating them. We saw editing information, naming rules, and simulation. We talked about transferring standards between the project and your enterprise database. We saw some specific standards like the electrotechnical standard. Keep in mind that if you're using pneumatic diagrams or hydraulic diagrams, the options will be of the same type. So you will have some component display options, the symbology, the colors, the thickness, etc., and some naming rules. So it's the same idea. I just use electrical for illustration. We also looked a little bit about templates. So the templates are managed in a very similar way to the previous versions. It's just that it allows you now to carry and to apply standards in bulk to your project and to your diagrams. I guess this is it for the presentation. I'd like to go back to you now to see if you have any questions, anything that's not clear you might want me to repeat. I have a question from JC. So when I save the template, will it save the title block as well? Yep, this is a good question, and yes, it will, because the title block is actually part of the page setup or the page layout. So let's do this just as a quick illustration. I'm going to create my ANSI-B portrait here. I will add a title block to it. Let's use this right there. Put it here, save and quit. Apply it. Yes. So now, this is my new page setup. If I save this as a document template or a project template, it doesn't matter. Document. Okay. Let's save that. So document. That. Save as electrotechnical diagram. I'll give it a name, call it title block. Now, in any other project, or in this project, doesn't matter, if I create a new diagram and I apply title block to it, it will have that title block. And keep in mind that if that title block contained some document-specific fields or project-specific fields, the information in those fields would be updated according to the current project that you have. So yes, definitely, the title block would be carried by the template. I hope this answers your question, JC. If you have any other questions, feel free. Ziad or Roy. Roy, you may ask some questions as well. Yes. Yes. So of course, when if you can apply your title block by applying the templates, then it will allow you to maintain your standards. And all you need to do is simply add the relevant information in your document. It will be updated everywhere according to that standard. Okay, I'll give you a few more minutes to think about some more questions. I don't know if Ziad has any questions. You're welcome, JC. Okay. Well, before we end the presentation, I'd like to show you a little bit some more information about how to contact us in case. So you can anytime you can log on the Automation Studio website. There's a lot of relevant information, any information about new releases, upcoming trainings, upcoming webinars, etc. It's very useful. So anytime you can, feel free to consult the website. If you have any more questions about what we saw today or some other application that you may be working on, technical support is available. You can contact us by logging on the support portal using your login information when you register with the software. You can send us an email at support@famictech.com or simply drop us a line, and there's always somebody to help. Okay, so if nobody has any questions, I believe we're good. So thank you everybody for your time. I hope this was good for you. JC. Yes, JC is asking if there's going to be a link for the for today's webinar for future reference. Yes, there will be. Actually, I'm not aware yet of the of how to get to it, but yes, it will be posted on our website. Actually, there will be a link for that. Maybe David, do you have any information about that?
Yeah, I was just going to say on the website we have a section that says webinars, and actually, Joe, I don't know if you want to go check it out now. You can just show that on the screen, and it'll take usually, I don't know, maybe 2-3 days to upload this to the website, and it's actually going to link to a YouTube video. We found that was the best way for the best quality. Yeah. If you go to the webinar section.
You see it?
We'll just go to the professional, just click on the website,
Yeah.
and then near the top, I think it's under the training tab. There's webinar
videos. Here you go. Yes. All right, that's it. Thanks, David. So yes, it will be linked to from the Automation Studio website. So all you need to do is go to the professional edition under training, webinars, videos, and you'll be able to look at the video. All right. Well, thanks again, everyone, and stay tuned for the next webinars, which will be the second and third parts of the standards, collaboration, and API. So first of all, just a quick preview. Collaboration will discuss about multi-user interface and how to have multiple users access and manage Automation Studio projects. And APIs, with the APIs webinar, we will discuss a little bit about scripting. It's a new feature in Automation Studio version 6. You'll be able to create, to apply functions or other properties to components, to projects, files, etc. in bulk using scripts. So stay tuned for that. You will have all the information about that on the Automation Studio website. Other than that, have a nice afternoon, everyone, and we'll see you at the next webinar.